You call it social. You're just addicted to noise. Isolation terrifies you because without an audience, you're forced to meet the weak man you've been hiding. You were taught to fear isolation because it removes your camouflage. When you're constantly around people, texts, group chats, noise, plans, you can pretend you're progressing while staying exactly the same. Society loves that version of you. Busy, sociable, harmless, easily steered. Isolation ruins that comfort. It strips the costume off. Let's correct the frame immediately. Isolation is not loneliness. Isolation is strategic withdrawal. It's what competent predators do before they strike. It's what commanders do before they rebuild a winning position. You don't isolate because you're broken. You isolate because you're done being accessible. A Machiavellian lens is simple. What you can access, you can influence. What you can't access, you must respect or replace. When you're always available, you're cheap. When you disappear on purpose, you become a variable, harder to control, harder to bait, harder to rank. Most men live inside a public aquarium. Everyone taps the glass, family, coworkers, friends, women, strangers online, and you flinch on command. You react, explain, entertain, defend, post, respond, show up. That's not living. That's being trained. Isolation is how you step out of the aquarium, because the modern world doesn't need to imprison you physically. It just needs to keep you stimulated and socially obedient. If you're always plugged into other people's opinions, you never develop your own standard. You become a democracy of moods. Whatever the room rewards, you become. Isolation reverses the direction of control. Instead of the world shaping you, you start shaping yourself. Here's what makes isolation a true upgrade tool. It creates friction. Friction is where weak habits die. When you're isolated, there's no audience to impress, no quick validation, no easy distraction, no social reset to wipe away the shame of wasted days. You can't outsource your identity to reactions anymore. And that's why isolation feels violent at first. Because your brain is used to being anesthetized by noise. Men confuse pain with danger. They run back to people the moment discomfort rises. They call it connection. It's not connection. It's dependence. Isolation exposes three uncomfortable truths. How much you perform. Most of your personality is not you. It's a response to who's watching. How little you decide. Your schedule is a compromise with everyone else's expectations. How weak your internal order is. Without external structure, you drift. And drift is the default state of men who have never led themselves. This is why isolation is a sovereignty move. It forces you to become your own chain of command. And understand, this isn't go live in a cave. It's not aesthetic. It's not monk cosplay. Isolation is controlled distance from anything that lowers your standards. You don't isolate to escape life. You isolate to stop being consumed by other people's priorities. Because most men are being farmed. Farmed for attention. Farmed for favors. Farmed for emotional labor. Farmed for availability. The world calls you a good guy, while it harvests your time and leaves you with nothing but fatigue and resentment. Isolation cuts the harvesting. It also triggers a social reaction you should expect. People will punish you for withdrawing. Not with honesty, never honesty with guilt. You've changed. You think you're better than us. Where have you been? You're being distant. Translation: your availability was benefiting them, and now it isn't. A sovereign understands this immediately. If your absence angers them, your presence was being used. So this chapter installs the frame shift you need before the 7 reasons even matter. Isolation is not a feeling. It's a position. It's not sadness. It's resource control. It's not weakness. It's refusal to be governed. You're not isolating to heal. You're isolating to upgrade your rank internally and externally. When you control your access, you control your mind. When you control your mind, you stop living like a public service. That's the lens. Noise is not entertainment. It's sedation. The world doesn't keep you social because it cares about your happiness. It keeps you social because social men are governable men. They calibrate. They seek approval. They fear standing alone with an unpopular decision. That fear is a leash. Here's the mechanism in one line. Noise externalizes your identity. The more input you consume, the less authority you have over yourself. You become a mirror, reflecting whoever is closest, loudest, or most rewarding. And the system that keeps you weak runs on three engines: dopamine, validation, and social calibration. Dopamine, the slot machine in your pocket. Every notification is a lever. Pull it, maybe you get a reward. A message, a laugh, a like, a response, a spark of relevance. That unpredictability is the trap, intermittent reinforcement, the same mechanism that keeps gamblers broke. So your mind starts living in anticipation, not intention. Isolation kills that anticipation. That's why it feels boring at first. It's not boredom. It's withdrawal from stimulation you didn't earn. And a man in withdrawal is honest. He sees what he avoided: his laziness, his lack of direction, his dependence on the crowd to feel real. Validation, the soft collar. Noise is also people, and people are mirrors that lie. When you're constantly around others, you start measuring yourself by reactions. Did they laugh? Did they approve? Did she reply? Did they include me? Did I look competent? That constant measuring is status anxiety disguised as being social. Here's the ugly truth. The more you need to be liked, the less dangerous you are. Because dangerous men don't ask for permission through smiles. They decide, they enforce, they walk away. Validation addiction makes you compromise in micro steps. You don't betray yourself once. You betray yourself daily, small concessions to stay accepted. Isolation removes the mirror. No applause, no reassurance, no social anesthesia. Now you have to decide what you are without witnesses. That's why isolation upgrades men. It forces internal authority to replace external approval. Social calibration. The herd algorithm. When you're always connected, your nervous system becomes a sensor for group mood. You learn what's allowed to say, think, want. You edit yourself in real time. This creates the most common modern male disease: a personality built from reactions. You're not living, you're polling. That's why the crowd hates isolated men. Isolated men stop polling. They stop performing the acceptable version. They stop pretending the herd is intelligent. And when you stop polling, you become unpredictable. Unpredictable men can't be easily manipulated, because manipulation requires predictability. It requires you to respond on cue: guilt, anger, lust, shame, obligation. Noise keeps those buttons polished and ready. Isolation lets them rust. The hidden function of noise that prevents self-contact. Noise keeps you from hearing your own internal signals: what disgusts you, what you actually want, what you're tolerating, what you're afraid to change. A man who can't hear himself becomes a servant. He'll work for goals he didn't choose. He'll protect people who don't respect him. He'll stay loyal to environments that farm him. So the mechanism is ruthless and simple. Noise, stimulation, dependency, external validation, compromised standards, weak identity. That's why being social often correlates with being average. The herd rewards sameness. The herd punishes intensity. The herd laughs at discipline until it needs protection from a disciplined man. Isolation severs you from the herd's algorithm. It restores signal clarity, not comfort, clarity. And clarity is what upgrades you, because once you see the pattern, you can't unsee it. Most of your weakness isn't internal. It's input-driven. You don't need more friends. You need less noise. You don't need more talk. You need more command. Isolation doesn't just remove people. It removes your masks. And the first thing that happens in silence is ugly. The versions of you that were built for social survival start starving. They twitch. They bargain. They panic. Because they were never identities, just strategies for getting fed. Here are the archetypes that collapse when the room goes quiet. Read them like enemy profiles. Then decide which one has been driving your life. The performer. The performer doesn't live, he broadcasts. He measures his worth by reaction: laughs, likes, attention, approval, being seen. When isolated, he feels invisible, and invisible feels like death to a man whose identity was outsourced to an audience. In silence, he reaches for the phone the way a smoker reaches for nicotine. Not because he needs information, because he needs proof he exists. Tell, he can't do hard work unless someone might notice. Weakness. He confuses visibility with value. The pleaser. The pleaser is addicted to being harmless. He keeps peace, smooths tension, absorbs disrespect, over-explains, apologizes early. His goodness is not morality. It's a tactic to avoid conflict and stay accepted. Isolation terrifies him because there's nobody to appease, which means there's nobody to tell him he's okay. In silence, he confronts the truth. He's been buying safety with self-erasure. Tell, he feels guilty the moment he prioritizes himself. Weakness, he mistakes obedience for virtue. The herd follower. The herd follower doesn't choose, he copies. He adopts the group's opinions, style, politics, humor, ambitions, whatever keeps him inside the circle. Without the herd nearby, he loses direction fast because his direction was never internal. Isolation exposes him as a man with motion but no mission. He scrolls because he needs the herd to tell him what matters today. Tell, he's confused when alone but confident in a group. Weakness, he requires consensus to act. The rescuer. The rescuer survives by being needed. He fixes problems, carries burdens, helps people who never change. He mistakes being useful for being respected. The more chaotic others are, the more important he feels. Isolation breaks him because it removes the dopamine hit of being the savior. In silence, he feels purposeless because his purpose was built on other people's dysfunction. Tell, he's surrounded by projects, not peers. Weakness. He uses service to avoid building his own life. The romantic martyr. The martyr believes pain is proof. He stays loyal to disrespect. He tolerates coldness. He calls suffering depth. He thinks endurance will eventually be rewarded with love, appreciation, or recognition. Isolation humiliates him because it removes the narrative. No partner to chase. No situation to fight for. No emotional drama to justify his stagnation. In silence, he sees he was addicted to the struggle, not the person. Tell, he confuses intensity with intimacy. Weakness, he is loyal to his own wounds. The distracted addict. This one is modern, common, and lethal. He can't sit still. He can't focus. He can't read. He can't build. He jumps between stimulation sources, content, porn, junk food, messages, games, anything to avoid the pressure of stillness. Isolation exposes how weak his attention has become. His mind rebels because it was trained to be fed every 10 seconds. He calls it restlessness. It's dependency. Tell, he feels anxious without input. Weakness, he has no command over his own focus. The status accountant. He tracks rank obsessively. Who's winning, who's losing, who's admired, who's invited, who's dating who. He lives inside invisible scoreboards. That's why he's always networking, not connecting. Isolation feels like bankruptcy to him because it removes his ability to track status in real time. In silence, he realizes he built a life around other people's perception, not his own standards. Tell, he makes choices for optics. Weakness, he worships external ranking. Here's what this chapter is doing to you psychologically. It removes your excuses. Because once you know which archetype you are, you can't pretend isolation is too hard. It's not hard. It's exposing. Isolation doesn't create weakness. It reveals it. And that revelation is the upgrade point. You don't fix yourself by being more social. You fix yourself by letting the social crutches rot away until the sovereign version of you has to stand up. That's the function of silence. It forces the real chain of command to form. Isolation isn't just personal, it's political. Because the moment you're alone long enough to think clearly, you become difficult to manage. And the modern world is not designed to produce men like that. It's designed to produce engaged consumers and obedient social units, men who react on command. Noise is command. Crowds have always been the easiest weapon to aim. Not because crowds are evil, because crowds are predictable. Give them a slogan, an enemy, a reward, a fear, and they'll move like a single organism. History didn't change. The packaging did. Isolation is how you step outside that organism. That's why the system punishes it. It labels isolated men as weird, antisocial, lost, depressed, angry, dangerous. Not because isolation guarantees those things, but because the label discourages the behavior. If they can make you feel ashamed of distance, they can keep you in the herd without chains. Here's the deeper threat. Constant social exposure trains you to self-censor. You stop saying what you mean because someone might disagree. You stop pursuing what you want because it might look arrogant. You stop enforcing standards because it might create conflict. That's how soft control works, not through force, but through fear of disapproval. The herd becomes your prison guard. Isolation breaks the guard. And that has consequences, because once you stop calibrating to the room, you start noticing the room is full of parasites, opportunists, and weak alliances held together by convenience. You also start noticing something worse. Many of your relationships weren't relationships. They were contracts you never agreed to. You provide attention, they provide inclusion. You provide labor, they provide validation. You provide stability, they provide drama. You provide resources, they provide occasional warmth. Isolation exposes the fine print. That's why people resist it. It forces renegotiation. And renegotiation threatens everyone who benefits from the old arrangement. Human nature, the herd hates upgrades. Most men think the world punishes ambition because it's unfair. No, the world punishes ambition because it disrupts hierarchy. When you upgrade, you leave your assigned role. That triggers resentment in two groups: those who used you because they lose supply, those who compare themselves to you because your upgrade indicts their stagnation. So they try to pull you back with social weapons, guilt. We miss you, ridicule. Who do you think you are? Moral framing. Don't be selfish. Suspicion. You're acting different. It's not concern, it's containment. Isolation is the act of refusing containment. Why isolation creates real power. Power isn't charisma, power is clarity plus control. Isolation gives you both. Clarity. You see patterns without social fog. Control. You stop bleeding time into other people's agendas. And once you have those, you become selective. Selection is the beginning of sovereignty. Sovereign men don't need constant permission. They don't need to be liked by everyone to move forward. They don't need the herd to clap before they act. That makes them dangerous, not because they're violent, but because they're immune to social steering. The cost of staying plugged in: if you refuse isolation, you accept a slow death. Your attention gets fractured into nothing. Your standards get negotiated down. Your identity becomes a collage of other people's opinions. Your goals become reasonable instead of real. That's how men become middle-aged and resentful. They lived as a social instrument, not a sovereign mind. The world profits from keeping you distracted, agreeable, and socially dependent. Isolation threatens that profit. That's why it gets mocked, pathologized, and punished. Good. Let it be punished. Because punishment is how you know you're leaving the farm. Isolation doesn't upgrade you by magic. It upgrades you because it removes inputs, and weak men are nothing but inputs. Opinions, notifications, drama, cheap pleasure, social obligation. The herd pumping instructions into your skull. So the protocol is simple. Cut the wires, rebuild the system, re-enter on your terms. Not take a break. Not self-care, surgical isolation. Sever the feed. 48 hours minimum. Your first mistake is trying to isolate while still sipping the poison. No, you go cold. Kill notifications. All of them. Remove the quick check apps from your home screen. Stop giving people instant access to your attention. Cancel one social commitment you don't respect. This phase isn't about productivity. It's about dominance over reflex. Every time your hand reaches for the phone, you're watching your own weakness attempt a coup. Treat it like mutiny. Suppress it immediately. Establish territory, your daily fortress. Isolation without structure becomes decay. That's where losers rot and call it finding themselves. So you install a fortress schedule, simple, repeatable, non-negotiable. One physical demand daily, training, long walk, hard labor. One skill block daily, learning, building, writing, selling. One silence block daily, no music, no podcasts, no scrolling, just thought. This is not wellness. This is conditioning. A sovereign mind is built through repetitive command, not inspiration. Your goal is to make your day obey you. Starve the validation loop, no audience workouts. Most men can't improve because they keep performing improvement. They post progress. They hint at plans. They talk about what they're going to do. That's dopamine without achievement, like inhaling smoke instead of eating food. So the rule is ruthless. No announcements, no progress reports, no I'm working on myself. When you isolate, you stop advertising. You become unlisted. Your results show up later like a silent takeover. Controlled exposure, re-enter like a sniper. The point of isolation isn't to become a hermit. It's to return with leverage. So you re-enter selectively, like deploying a unit, not like wandering back into traffic. Limit social time to specific windows. Arrive late, leave early. Reduce responsiveness permanently. Speak less. Observe more. Why? Because the herd reads availability as rank. When you're always reachable, you look unemployed in life. When you're scarce, you look occupied by something bigger than them. Scarcity creates respect without a speech. Replace friends with standards. Isolation forces a truth most men avoid. Many connections are just mutual distraction. So you rebuild your circle using one metric only. Does this person raise or lower my standards? If they mock discipline, tempt you back into weakness, require you to stay average to keep them comfortable, drain you with endless problems they refuse to solve, then they're not a friend. They're a liability. A Machiavellian upgrade always includes purging liabilities. The access tax, your new social policy. After isolation, you implement a new law. Access to you is earned. Not with words, with behavior. You stop being the guy who replies instantly. You stop being the guy who always shows up. You stop being the guy who explains himself. You become harder to reach and you don't apologize for it. Because apology is a confession that your sovereignty is wrong. It isn't. Your time is a border. Borders are defended. The next phase is the isolation cycle. Upgrading isn't a one-time event. It's a cycle. You isolate to build. You re-enter to test. You isolate again to sharpen. Each cycle increases your tolerance for silence, your clarity, your standards, and your emotional immunity to crowd pressure. That's the real upgrade, not confidence. Independence from reaction. Because the man who can stand alone can't be manipulated with inclusion. He can't be controlled with shame. He can't be bought with attention. He becomes ungovernable. That's the protocol. Sever the feed, build the fortress, starve validation, re-enter selectively, price access, repeat. Isolation is not the upgrade. The man you become inside it is. And that requires an execution. Because the version of you that needs people, needs feedback, needs inclusion, needs constant contact, that version will sabotage every protocol you run. He will bargain. He will relapse. He will just check in. He will rebuild the cage and call it balance. So we kill him, not with affirmations, with policy. The socially dependent self is a domesticated animal. He has been trained by rewards and punishments. Reward. Attention, inclusion, laughter, sex, social warmth. Punishment. Silence, exclusion, mockery, guilt, labels like cold or weird. That conditioning is why you flinch when you pull away. The herd has a shock collar on you, and most men call the shocks conscience. It's not conscience, it's control. The identity death happens in 3 cuts. Kill the need to be seen as good. The socially dependent self worships one idol, being perceived as decent. So he makes himself available. He answers quickly. He over-explains. He tolerates disrespect to prove he's mature. He gives second chances like he's running a charity. That goodness is exactly why people feel entitled to you. Because entitlement doesn't grow around dangerous men. It grows around men who are proud of being harmless. Your first replacement belief is Machiavellian and non-negotiable. Virtue without power is a discount. Discounts attract scavengers. So you stop trying to look good and start trying to be effective. Effective men don't beg for respect. They enforce standards and let morality follow behind like paperwork. Kill the reflex to explain. Explanation is the signature of the weak. When someone questions your distance, your new policy is not to justify. Justification is a confession that they're owed access. The herd trains you to explain because explanations keep you in court. Court is where you can be argued with. Argued with means controlled. A sovereign doesn't enter court. He makes a decision and lets others adapt. So when people ask, "Why have you been distant?" the socially dependent self panics and tries to soothe them. He gives them your reasons, your emotions, your internal map. You replace that with short, sealed responses. "I've been focused. I'm not available like before. Different priorities now." No apology, no story, no debate. Silence plus brevity is how you keep your authority intact. It starves their ability to reframe you as guilty. Kill the addiction to the herd's rhythm. Most men don't live by their own rhythm. They live by the herd's tempo, weekends, group plans, constant updates, checking in, staying visible, staying relevant. That rhythm is designed for average men. It's not designed for builders. If you want an upgrade, you replace the herd rhythm with a sovereign rhythm. Early hours belong to your body and skill. Midday belongs to production. Evening belongs to recovery and planning. Social time becomes a scheduled window, not a default lifestyle. This is not discipline as a mood. This is discipline as a gate. When your day has gates, other people can't wander in and occupy it. The replacement identity. The selective man. Now we install the replacement, not loner, not mysterious, not alpha. Those are costumes. The real replacement identity is simple, selective. Selective with time, selective with attention, selective with access. Selective with who gets your energy. Selection is what makes isolation pay off. Because the socially dependent self collects people like trophies. The selective man collects alignment, habits, standards, skills, outcomes. Here's what changes when the replacement identity takes hold. You stop chasing inclusion. You become comfortable being misunderstood. Misunderstood is often the price of independence. You stop tolerating casual disrespect. Not because you're sensitive, because you're expensive. Expensive things aren't handled carelessly. You stop doing maintenance texts. You don't message to stay relevant. Relevance is earned through presence and value, not pinging. You stop confusing proximity with loyalty. Just because someone is around doesn't mean they're for you. Isolation teaches you to judge behavior, not familiarity. And here's the hardest truth. When you kill the socially dependent self, some relationships die automatically. Not as tragedy, as cleanup. People who benefited from your availability will feel threatened by your sovereignty. They will call it selfish. They will call it arrogance. They will call it cold. Let them. That reaction is proof the execution worked. Because the goal isn't to be liked by everyone. The goal is to become the kind of man who doesn't need everyone to like him in order to move. That's the upgrade. Isolation is a weapon. And like every weapon, it doesn't care about your intentions. It cares about your discipline. Use it correctly and you upgrade. Use it wrong and you rot quietly while telling yourself it's growth. Most men fail here because they treat isolation like a vacation from consequences. They disappear, avoid decisions, avoid hard work, avoid confrontation, avoid accountability, then call the decay peace. That's not sovereignty. That's retreat. Machiavelli's rule applies. Power is maintained by structure, not emotion. Isolation without structure is just a cage you built yourself. So here's the final warning in cold terms. Isolation is not virtue. Isolation is leverage. If you isolate and come back the same, you wasted it. If you isolate and return needy, you downgraded yourself. If you isolate and return with stronger standards, you changed your rank. The world only respects the third one. Because the moment you isolate, the herd starts writing a story about you. And if you don't control that story through behavior, someone else will. They'll label you antisocial, bitter, weird, arrogant, lost. Those labels aren't observations. They're containment tactics, designed to drag you back into the predictable role they prefer. If you rush to defend yourself, you prove they still own your frame. If you return with results, you erase the label without saying a word. That is how you win without conversation. Following are the two failures that destroy men in isolation. The rot. You isolate but you do nothing. No training, no building, no skill, no structure. Just scrolling in private, fantasizing about the man you could be, congratulating yourself for taking space. This is the invisible death. The body softens, the mind fogs, the discipline dissolves. And when you finally return to people, you return smaller. Not socially smaller, internally smaller. That's when contempt finds you again because you've proven you can't govern yourself. The fantasy. You isolate to feel powerful, not to become powerful. You imagine revenge. You imagine proving everyone wrong. You imagine the glow-up. You imagine the respect, but you don't install systems. You don't execute habits. You don't rebuild your standards. So isolation becomes theater, solo theater, and theater collapses the moment reality touches it. Isolation done correctly is not comfortable. It's a furnace. It burns off. Your addiction to validation, your tolerance for mediocrity, your dependence on social rhythm, your need to be liked, your habit of explaining yourself. And what's left is a man with a clean internal chain of command. This is why isolation upgrades you, because it forces you to live under your own law. No audience, no excuses, no external pacing. That's sovereignty. Here is the final test. Are you using isolation or is it using you? Ask yourself one question. No feelings, no poetry. When you isolate, do your standards rise or do they collapse? If they rise, you're using isolation as a power tool. If they collapse, you're hiding. And hiding is not strategy. It's fear with better lighting. Most men consume content like tourists. They visit ideas, take photos, and leave unchanged. If you want the upgrade, you don't agree with this. You implement it. Here's the filter for the next 7 days. No social scrolling. No checking in for approval. One physical demand daily. One skill block daily. One silence block daily. No announcement, no posting, no talking about it. Because if you need witnesses, you're still socially dependent. And if you're not willing to do 7 days of silence and discipline, then stop pretending you want sovereignty. You want comfort with a darker aesthetic. Isolation isn't for everyone. It's for men who are ready to be accountable when nobody is watching. That's the final truth. The upgrade happens when there's no audience to reward you, only your own law to obey.